Let's bring in Patrick McHenry. Been looking forward to hearing from the former chairman of the House Financial Services Committee and former Speaker Pro Tem, of course, Republican from the great state of North Carolina as well, and a colleague of Tom Tillis, Bloomberg politics contributor. Great to see you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back. What does Tom Tillis want to see here? And I know that you're not inside his head necessarily, but is it an ending of the investigation or a resolving of the investigation? Does he actually want to know if Jay Powell's guilty?
Well, a substantial part of Washington wants to be in Senator Tillis' head right now and trying to figure out a way through this. The reality is that with a one-vote margin for Republicans on the Senate Banking Committee and committees across the Senate, Tom Tillis has the deciding vote on whether or not Kevin Marsh gets reported out of committee. This is a huge thing for the administration, for the Federal Reserve, for the global economy. Tom Tillis is the pathway for any nominee through that committee and any piece of policy. And so right now, Tom Tillis has made it quite obvious, quite clear what he wants. He wants the investigation into Jay Powell to end, the investigation into the Federal Reserve and their building project to end. Those things can be arranged. I think that's possible. But he needs that assurance. He needs a very clear assurance for him to vote in the affirmative for Kevin Marsh. And he wants to vote for Kevin Marsh. So that means that Marsh is assured a positive vote out of committee if the Powell investigation and when the Powell investigation ends.
Well, when the investigation ends may be up to the president if he decides he wants to push to have it dropped. And when given the opportunity multiple times in an interview earlier today, he said no. He wants to find out what exactly happened with this renovation and why a project he says he could have done with $25 million has taken billions of dollars. Are you surprised that the president, at least at this point, is not pursuing the off-ramp on this one? Do you think that will change if we get to mid-May and he's actually faced with the prospect of a Chairman Powell who's going to stay in place in a custodial manner for a period of time is facing him?
Yes, and I think we also have an Inspector General report that is due imminently. I think that report can help in this investigation from the Department of Justice or the U.S. Attorney here in the District of Columbia. I think that can be dealt with, but it is going to take time, and certainly we do have time before Powell's term ends.
Interesting how we may or may not get out of this. As somebody who ran the Financial Services Committee and actually had to run these hearings with the Fed chair, you have a good sense of some of the stipulations that come with being Fed chair, some of the disclosures, and in this case, compliance when it comes to financial holdings. What did you make of this back and forth today with Senator Elizabeth Warren, suggesting that he's not only out of compliance, but could have some arrangement that would create further conflict in the way that he divests his enormous holdings? What is about to happen?
Ridiculous, completely ridiculous and irrelevant. The reality is that the ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee is going to find some reason to be a no, and this is all that they could come up with. And the disclosures that Kevin Marsh made about his financial holdings are about funds that hold other investments. And so if you're holding a venture fund, you have multiple different investments in there. The magnitude of those investments are typically non-disclosed, and a variety of different investment techniques. I think Kevin Marsh can come into full compliance with all the laws required of the Federal Reserve and high-ranking executive officials in our government. I think he can do that sufficiently in accordance with the law, but I don't think he broke any of those laws in the way he disclosed his financial holdings.
Well, this is something we'll be getting into later on today when the ranking member herself, Elizabeth Warren, joins us at 5 p.m. Eastern time. But you're here with us now, Mr. Chairman. So I also wonder your take on the actual monetary policy trajectory moving forward, which Kevin Warsh very clearly said he would not commit to. He doesn't believe in forward guidance. I just wonder that if and when we do get a Warsh cut, if you will, if Kevin Warsh is the chair and the Fed decides to cut rates at some point in the future, if you think that financial markets in particular are going to view that as credible, given the conversation being had about independence because of the pressure that the president has not been shy on piling on the idea that he wants interest rates lower.
Well, sure. But I think I do think forward guidance is a helpful and good thing for the market. I think something like the Taylor rule, which would formalize that is a good thing for the Federal Reserve and the financial markets generally. That was a disappointing comment today that we heard from Kevin Warsh. But generally speaking, sitting outside the Federal Reserve System and having served within the Federal Reserve as a Fed governor, I think you see some level of respect that Kevin Warsh offered today for that process, that he then has to take the reins as chair. That is a ongoing operation with substantial engagement in the financial markets. A balance sheet is massive, multiples the size of when he left the Federal Reserve a few years ago. And so he has to consult with his colleagues and figure out how the committee process is currently working in order to guide monetary policy on a forward-going basis. And I think, so I think that is certainly something to be noted about today. Additionally, a Fed Treasury accord, I think, is a high time coming, given the substantial engagement in the financial markets, the substantial size of our debt and deficit. And so there has to be some level of accord for the coming generation for the Federal Reserve. Third and finally, the question of independence. The question of independence is about performance. That is really how it's designed. You can write laws however you want, but you have to have performance that shows independence. I think Kevin Warsh can and will be an independent chair of the Federal Reserve, just like we've had for the last couple of generations.
Well, a lot of talk about debt and deficit surrounding the war with Iran. Patrick McHenry would like to ask you about some of the developments that have emerged today, because it does appear that the next round of negotiations, which we had presumed would be later today, maybe early tomorrow, are now on ice. The New York Times reporting that J.D. Vance is postponing his trip to Islamabad. And we've seen, of course, quite a bit of rhetoric between the U.S. and Iran in the past 24 hours, with the president saying to Bloomberg specifically he is unlikely to agree to extend the ceasefire beyond what he now is saying is tomorrow night for a deadline. If we roll through this deadline tomorrow and fighting is set to resume, does the president need to consult Congress on next steps?
I don't think so. I think what we're talking about here is small. This is not as large as a war-making operation with ground troops that the founding fathers contemplated over 200 years ago. And so the question of national security is a heavy burden for the president, but one primarily governed by the president's decision making. And so what we see here is a question of how we get out of the situation in Iran. What is the foregoing analysis of the level of security to bring petrochemicals through the Straits of Hormuz? This has a global impact, has a disproportionate impact on Asia. That disproportionate impact on Asia means that those Asian players like India and China should have some offering of stability in Iran. And we've not seen that leadership from them. The president is obviously slated to meet with Chairman Xi in mid-May. And I think we would like to see something resolved. And I think the administration would like to see something resolved in part or in whole by that meeting to discuss our trading relationship with China and China's trading relationship with the world. So what's going to happen here in the coming days, I don't think will dictate what is going to happen in the coming months. My colleagues at Lazard have said the base case here is that you're going to see not large-scale action resume, but potentially small-scale action on an ongoing basis and a dialogue between us and Iran. And the likelihood in the coming weeks won't be some big peace agreement, but we'll set facts on the ground, and we'll start seeing oil go through the Straits of Hormuz, and we're going to see a relief to the global economy over periods of weeks, not overnight, and certainly not in the next 48 hours. And I think that is I think what we should think about as a base case with our arrangement with Iran.
All right, Patrick McHenry, always great to have you. Bloomberg Politics contributor now, the former chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. We always appreciate your insight here.